We are recording the number 2, second one, in these little videos about things surrounding Greensburg. In the last one, we looked at Radaba, which is right over here on this 1876 mapping. And this is the main line of the railroad, and this is a mill, a grist mill that used to sit over here by what we now think of as Route 30, but was then the old turnpike. That's what I'm talking about. It was called Valhalla Roller Mills, and I was told that that name Valhalla was given to it by Frank Cowan, who lived nearby, and I'll show you that. This lady was Sarah Reel Smeltzer. She was the ancestress of Leroy Smeltzer and Glenn Smeltzer. Leroy has shared with us many of these photos. As a matter of fact, this photo came from his collection. Now here, this will put it in a more contemporary context. This is Radaba, the main line of the railroad, Route 30. The Radaba branch coming down here. This over here is where that mill was that I just showed you. And nearby was the home of Frank Cowan, his estate, the person who gave the name Valhalla to the mill over here. Frank Cowan, ever since he was a young kid, had an interest in Nordic mythology and legends. His ancestors on his father's side came from the Scandinavian countries. That's Frank Cowan, who lived at Mount Odin once upon a time. And when he died, he donated the place to the city of Greensburg. And many people have forgotten him. An interesting character, probably one of the most interesting characters that Greensburg has produced. He was a lawyer, a physician, a world traveler, a newspaper editor, a secretary to President Johnson. He got around. When he was just growing up, this is where he lived, in this house on West Pittsburgh Street. It was his father's place, who was a United States Senator. And since young Frank, was a son of a senator, he managed to get to Washington. His father, Senator Cowan, was in charge of a committee on patents, and he got Frank a job as clerk for that. This is Mount Odin, another photo by Leroy Smeltzer. Frank Cowan did rather well in Washington. In his spare time, he managed to learn law. He returned to Greensburg in 1865 to pass the bar exam, and he went back to Washington. And he also got himself a job there as secretary to President Johnson. And at nighttime, he went to school at the medical school in Georgetown, and he graduated as a doctor. And he returned to Greensburg in 1869 as both a lawyer and a physician. He married Harriet Jack and set himself up in business and wrote a number of books, did a lot of interesting things. He would occasionally have parties out at Mount Odin, inviting some of the people that the pillar of society people did not appreciate. He also took in stray dogs. I think these things speak rather well of Frank Cowan. And after Frank Cowan passed away, Mount Odin was used for a period of time as the barracks for the local state police. This is the fellows coming out for a photo opportunity. That's Mount Odin, as most people think of it. The mill was up here and Mount Odin was up here. This mapping just shows railroads. Shows the Radaba branch going down. And there was once a thing called the Hempfield branch going off of the Radaba branch, but I would not want you to confuse that with what was called the Hempfield Railroad, which is mapped going through the same area, but was never built. The Hempfield Railroad was to go from Wheeling, West Virginia to Greensburg, but it got as far as Washington, PA, and ran out of money. But some of the work for the grading had been done. So in the 1890s, when the coal towns out here started to produce, like Hermione and Arona, a railroad was built out here called the Hempfield Branch that could be used to haul the coal into market. This is mapping from 1917, showing the main line of the railroad, the turnpike, various things. The Radaba branch shows up, Southwest branch. And this is the actual mapping for the Hempfield branch. I did this to kind of clear things up to make it more understandable. This heavy black line is the main line of the railroad. This is the Southwest branch, the Radaba branch. And this is Hempfield branch going out to these coal towns to deliver coal to market. And we'll see something right here where the Hempfield branch took off. This is Radaba, the Radaba branch coming down. This is Route 136 coming out. And what we're going to see is right here. You can see the Hempfield branch took off. And the next shot we see should be one of Leroy Smeltzer's photographs. Out there, right under Route 136, probably didn't have that number yet. But the tower for the Hempfield branch sat right there. Hempfield Junction, it was called. And there was a wreck. And Leroy Smeltzer got himself out there and did a photo for us. Now this shows contemporary, present tense. This is a corner of the Radaba branch, which is still in function. This is Route 136, which is still a road we know. And there's just a trace left of the Hempfield branch. This is the trace that I'm following. There's no more tracks on it. The tracks were ripped up. Probably the kids that live out here use it for their dirt bikes. And there are probably a number of people who live in this suburban area who have no idea that there was once a railroad running through their backyard. And I think we've said enough. Talked about Valhalla Mill and Frank Cowan and the Hempfield branch. And we'll see you again for number 3 in this series on things surrounding Greensburg, when we'll talk about the mines down at Red Onion and Carbon. And so long for now.